Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of the story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun. Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence. We go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything, and you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
All right, guys. Today's date, April the 10th, 2021, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm your host and most Will Buchanan on How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before I do get started, we do try to make this a family-friendly podcast, so we do try to watch our language. But sometimes there may be things shown here that might be a little bit graphic for young viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. Aside from that, welcome everybody. So let's go ahead and get into it. There is a certain Republican that is in the hot seat, and it seems it's just getting worse from here.
Matt Gaetz adding 2 New York attorneys to his defense team, including Mark Mukasey, who has also represented the Trump Organization in the past. In a statement, a spokeswoman said the 2 will help Gaetz fight back against the unfounded allegations. Federal investigators are looking into Gaetz's role in an alleged prostitution ring as part of a wider probe of the congressman and his associates. Now, the Daily Beast offering new insight into the trail of money. Venmo records obtained by the site show how in May of 2018, Gaetz reportedly paid friend and then Seminole County tax collector Joel Greenberg $900. The next morning, Greenberg transferred money totaling the same amount to 3 young women, according to the report.
When Matt Gaetz sent them to Joel Greenberg, it said test and hit up this girl. When Joel Greenberg paid them to these girls, it said school and tuition.
CNN has not confirmed the details of allegations in this story, and there's no indication the women were under 18 at the time or the payments were for anything illegal.
It really is an honor to be here today.
Gaetz's friend, Greenberg, has been indicted on 33 federal charges, including sex trafficking of a minor.
He's uniquely situated.
Greenberg is likely to enter a plea deal in his case, raising the possibility he could cooperate with federal investigators and put pressure on the congressman.
I'm sure Matt Gaetz is not feeling very comfortable today.
Gaetz has continued to deny any wrongdoing.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie.
Writing on Monday, I have never ever paid for sex. And second, I, as an adult man, have not slept with a 17-year-old. In a sign the Gaetz investigation may expand beyond sex trafficking, the New York Times is reporting prosecutors were told Gaetz discussed arranging a sham candidate in a Florida state Senate race last year with a Florida lobbyist to help his friend win the seat. Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger, the first GOP member of Congress, openly calling for Gaetz to step down, tweeting late Thursday, Matt Gaetz needs to resign.
Oh, when they eat their young, it is fun to watch, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I've been talking about Matt Gaetz because, honestly, he is a douche. He looks like the kind of guy that you want to punch in the face when you see him on sight. Trust me, I know a few guys like that. Yes, but Matt Gaetz is embattled. He basically, as we said before, has allegedly, may or may have not, may have done child sex trafficking, basically being involved with an underage girl. Again, this is all allegedly because none of it's been proven yet. The thing about this is that now everything that he's doing seems to be catching fire. Even more so that even his good friend Sean Hannity has left him.
Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz' pressure that he's facing in this federal probe to sex trafficking. But one place where you wouldn't hear about it at all as a news viewer would actually be on Fox News. Gaetz has not been on the network since the widely panned interview he did with Tucker Carlson that Fox called so weird. And by one count, the Gaetz investigation has been mentioned on Fox just 7 times. Here's why that's particularly striking. Gaetz is well known to their audience. It's newsworthy to hear about developments of someone who's well known in the news. In fact, Gaetz even rose to prominence primarily because of those many, many appearances you see on the screen on Fox News. Since August 2017, he's appeared a whopping 313 times, and out of those, 121 were on.
Country said two police officers in Iowa.
That means he's on there all the time. And Hannity went further. This is something that almost no one does in media, including even, in fairness, most people who work for Fox News. Hannity went out and actively electorally campaigned for Gaetz, which is not the kind of thing anchors or journalists do. This was at a 2018 rally in Florida where the two men praised each other profusely.
I got to thank Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity gives me a platform almost every night to get out there and tell it like it is. And I thank him for that.
It's this young Mickey Mantle over here. And it's your next governor over there. They are the ones fighting the hardest for the president. And I'm very thankful to both of you for what you do every day, which is why it's an honor to share the stage with both of you.
You almost can't tell who's benefiting who. And it was within a year or so that Hannity was privately giving Gaetz advice on managing a different crisis, one where he was actually facing an ethics investigation. And that probe focused on whether Gaetz was tweeting overly threatening messages at Trump fixer Michael Cohen, whether it constituted witness intimidation. But Hannity, who we just showed you, was so quick to discuss Gaetz, to campaign for him, to, as Gaetz put it, have him on his show almost every night. Well, Sean Hannity hasn't mentioned Gaetz once since all this became public, this investigation. Again, as mentioned, as for the underlying charges, Gaetz denies any wrongdoing. We're joined now by our friend Jason Johnson. Jason, it's quite a turnaround.
So we're going to stop it right there just because it goes into something else. But I just want to point that out about Gaetz and where he currently sits right now. I mean, it is amazing that, again, there seems to be a lot of fire here. I mean, yes, we say smoke. You know the old saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, there's a fire burning somewhere. I mean, you simply put his former I guess you could say lobbyist is in jail, or, you know, being brought up on charges of child sex trafficking. You know, the one that he sent money to in the previous story that we just mentioned. And then, like you said, Fox News. Fox News is a Republican safe haven. And amazingly enough, he hasn't been on Fox News since this happened. Keep in mind, Fox News is along with Newsmax and various other conservative-heavy news sites, Fox News is like the mecca for these people. And honestly, if you want to be seen on the red states, you go to Fox News. And he was on Fox News, specifically other fellow douchebag, Sean Hannity's show, and now they don't even mention him. So again, that kind of tells you off the fact of the matter that, okay, are we going beyond allegation, or is there something there? because now it's getting unavoidable that something may be there to where now it's like, okay, we really gonna have to face this. We're gonna have to go ahead and give it context. Is it true? And if it is true, add another one to the party of family values. That's all I'm saying. Move right along, guys. I have been talking about this senator, this Democratic senator, and I keep saying this the entire time, that if he is going to be the roadblock that Republicans never asked for, but they love, it's going to be him. I'm talking about Senator Joe Manchin. Senator Joe Manchin, Joe Manchin, I should say, I'm sorry. He said, he quoted on Wednesday evening that he opposes the frequent use of the budget reconciliation process, which Democrats use in a 50-50 state to pass President Joe Biden's legislative policies. He sat there and said, the quotes the Washington Post, it potentially potentially slows Democrats' abilities to push through a sweeping infrastructure package that currently does not have any Republican support. Okay. Again, it's like I've been saying this. I have been saying this since this guy became apparent. He is a roadblock. And I've been saying this keep in mind, Democrats are smarter than Republicans, yes. But what the Republicans do so well versus the Democrats, all Republicans toe the party line. When there's a certain priority or policy that they're trying to get past the Republicans, everybody votes for it. Simple and plain. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is when it comes to Democrats that all Democrats just can't toe the party line. Joe Manchin is one of them. He actually is a moderate Democrat, which is basically conservative. That's the one thing I keep on pointing out. Whenever I hear someone say they're a moderate Democrat, I'm like, oh, you're just conservative light. That's all that is. And it's amazing that his argument is that we need to have Republican support. No, we don't. If anything, the budget reconciliation process proves that we don't need Republican support to push through things like, making sure people have enough money to pay bills, making sure that, healthcare gets covered, making sure that we're trying to get an infrastructure bill passed. If we can do it without Republican support, which, by the way, they haven't voted for any of this, cool. I can live with that. But apparently Mr. Joe Manchin can't. He must have Republican support because he still believes in bipartisan relations. I don't think it's possible. Bipartisan is just a word that just really shouldn't be used anymore, especially with Republicans, and the simple fact of the matter is that they are not about to vote for anything that is not in the interest of corporations and rich people. But he also says, and he quotes, if the filibuster is eliminated or budget reconciliation becomes the norm, a new and dangerous precedent will be set to pass sweeping partisan legislation that changes the direction of our nation every time there's a change in political control. The consequences will be profound. Our nation may never see stable governing again. Dude, did you not see the last 4 years? The last 4 years, we never had stable government. Trump was president. Mitch McConnell was Senate Majority Leader. Democrats had the House, and again, there was still unstableness.
A man who protects and serves our country says 2 police officers.
I apologize. We'll get to that story momentarily. It just wants to play so bad. But again, guys, this whole idea of just him saying that, him being a roadblock is not only amazing. It's not only amazing. It's dangerous. Because again, keep in mind, we're not too far off from the 2022 midterm elections. They're starting to ramp that up as we speak. So that means that the slim majority that we all have currently, the slim majority that the Democrats may have right now may not last. So again, the Republicans, if they can get, one change here or there in the Senate, there goes the majority. Now at the same time, it is possible that the Democrats could extend their majority. It's possible. But do I see it happening? It's going to be hard to say. But as long as you have moderate Democrats like Senator Joe Manchin out there, it's going to be very hard to pass bills. I'll be honest with you, it's going to be very hard to pass progressive bills there, because you're going to have individuals like that who are going to block everything and then scream that the other side should get a fair shake, when not realizing 4 years ago the other side, Republicans, when they had the office of the president, when they had Senate Majority Leader, did not care how Democrats felt. And so now we should care how the other side feels. Okay, Joe Manchin, just let us know when you decide to become Republican. Just let us know. But moving right along, guys, I did want to go ahead and go to this story because, number one, you've already heard it play twice already. And number two, again, this is just another example of why we should be concerned, especially with the idea of why we should be really wondering about police reform and the way they are approaching minorities.
A man who protects and serves our country says 2 police officers in Isle of Wight pulled him over, threatened, and assaulted him. And there's video of the entire encounter. Good evening, I'm Adriana de Alba. Janet has the night off.
And I'm David Allen. The Army's second lieutenant filed a lawsuit against the 2 Windsor police officers involved. Ali Weatherton talked to the man's lawyer and has the video.
Open the door slowly and step out.
This police body camera video is now part of a lawsuit.
I'm honestly afraid to get out. Can I?
Yeah, you should be. Get out.
It shows Karan Nazario, an Army second lieutenant in uniform, getting stopped by police. It happened in Windsor, Virginia, back in December.
Whoa, hold on. What's going? Hold on.
It was horrifying to see the officers behave the way they did.
Attorney Jonathan Arthur is representing Nazario in this newly filed lawsuit against 2 Windsor police officers.
There was no justification for that type of conduct, or at least not under the law.
This lawsuit says the officers stopped Nazario for not having a license plate. He was driving his new SUV, which had temporary tags taped to the back window.
You haven't even told me why I'm being stopped. Really?
Documents say Nazario pulled over in a well-lit area less than a mile from where the police officer activated his lights. Police body cam video shows the police officers getting out of their cars with their guns drawn. Nazario claims they yelled conflicting orders at him and pepper sprayed him while he was in his SUV.
What are you, a specialist, Corporal? What are you?
I'm a lieutenant.
Lieutenant, get out of the car!
Once he was out of the car, Nazario said the police officers hit, handcuffed, and interrogated him.
Why am I being treated like this? Why?
Because you're not cooperating. Get on the ground.
The lawsuit says the police officers let Nazario go after threatening to charge him with obstructing justice, eluding police, and assaulting a law enforcement officer. I reached out to Windsor Police Department to see what they had to say about the lawsuit. No one at the department had a comment. Ali Weatherton, 13.
Of course they didn't have a comment. What do you expect? Again, to give this story some context, guys, the guy had just recently bought an SUV that did not have a rear license plate. The police did flag him, but he drove to a gas station because he didn't want to stop in a dark area. He wanted to go to a well-lit area. So it also, that being said, of course, when they got there, the officers, I guess, were pissed because they had to get out of the cars. And at the same time, really went after the guy for no reason. Even though the second lieutenant, who was currently serving at the time, was sitting there asking, what did I do? Why am I being detained? Which are all valid questions you can ask when law enforcement engages you. You can't ask, why am I being detained? You can't ask, why are you pulling me over? Because they have to tell you by law. And you're right. That just goes to show you that no matter who you are, they will always target you. You're exactly right. No argument there. You are exactly right. With also that being said, guys, I don't blame the guy for suing. Because, okay, you could have just sat there. I mean, sometimes, and I'll say this again about law enforcement, there needs to be reform. Which, again, I'm going to cover in another story a little bit later on. But there needs to be reform. Because, again, we're seeing too many stories like this come up. And it's too easy because a lot of people do dismiss it because, well, a lot of black people say this. A lot of black people, a lot of minorities say this, and it gets dismissed. And let's be honest, it does. Especially you have policymakers, chief of police, the fraternal order police, and even in the case of George Floyd, you're still seeing this level of this blue wall that's still out there. And again, do I want the officers fired? No. I don't want the officers fired, but I do want them reprimanded. I do want them retrained. And if they do requalify, then yes, they continue to be in law enforcement. But if they're not qualified, then they don't need to be law enforcement. It's just that freaking simple. I mean, it's just like the experiment. It's just like certain towns have fired their law enforcement and actually had them rehire, and had them rehire under different guidelines. Mental and health evaluations. They had them go through de-escalation training, to have them go through negotiation tactics and things of that nature, and mental health awareness. They had them go through all this. And if they still qualify to be law enforcement officers, cool. Because as I said before, it doesn't take past half a year it doesn't take half a year to become a law enforcement officer. It takes longer to become a hairstylist than it does to become a law enforcement officer. And that alone should tell you something. Even more so that the second lieutenant in that video, he asked the same question. He's like, why in the world did you even pull me over for what? For not having a rear license plate? I just bought this vehicle. But they didn't give him the chance to explain himself. They were too busy trying to impose fear and just their will because they're cops. And I still sit there and said, watching that video, what was the need for pepper spray? I mean, there's just too many questions there. But as the story develops, we'll keep following that along. Now, I mentioned this story... excuse me. I had mentioned this story a little while back. I keep saying this, guys, about voting. I keep saying this about voting because I want this to remain utterly clear. Lawmakers in 47 states are introducing bills that will make it harder to vote. Keep in mind, for the simple fact of the matter, they're not trying to change the laws because of voter fraud. They're changing the laws because of voter turnout. Specifically using Georgia. Georgia as an example, a lot more African Americans came out and voted in Georgia to turn that state blue and elect its first black senator. And let's be honest, a lot of Republicans are now changing, they're pushing the goal lines back is what they're doing. And I'm thinking about that. 47 states are introducing those bills to change the laws. And if you don't believe me, look at Texas. Texas has already started. They already are advancing a restrictive election bill. Now, what the election bill entails is that this legislation imposed criminal penalties for errors during the election process, such as making it a felony for an official to give a voter an absentee ballot application or solicit the submission of an application if the voter does not request it first. This is supposed to reduce the likelihood of voter fraud in elections. So you got to think about this for a second. That means that an election official cannot, if this is law, by the way, is not allowed to give a voter an absentee ballot application or solicit the submission of an application if the voter is not requested first. So again, this is all supposed to be to prevent voter fraud. Keep in mind, the previous election has had 0 counts of voter fraud. According to everyone, the last election we were in was the most safest election we've ever had. Only because Trump was making fun of everyone. Oh, don't do mail-in voting. Oh, don't do this. Oh, the election's gonna be rigged and all this stuff. And every state took that as a fault. Every state took that as a fault. They turned around and sat there and said, no, we're going to show you how safe elections are and things of that nature. So again, this is them pushing the goal lines back. They realize that now we played the game and we got the people who we wanted in, and Republicans don't like that. So what did Republicans do? Republicans are changing the rules in every state. This is exactly why I sit there and I say this. We have to be careful about who we vote for in the local elections. Because, yes, we should vote for the federal. We should vote for the state and representatives. But you also have to remember, we have state and local legislation. Now, our state and local legislations are just as important because those people can put laws in that can affect you statewide. Trust me, I live in Tennessee. I would not be surprised if Tennessee state legislature tries to do the same thing that Texas and all these other 47 states are trying to do. Only because I keep telling you guys, we have to change things at the local level as well, because if we don't, the same idiots that are still there can still cause trouble for a whole bunch of people. And you're right, punishing people for exercising their right to vote. It really is. It is slick voter intimidation. It is the Jim Crow laws is what it is. It's the new Jim Crow. So again, I would not be surprised that, again, you also got to remember, election midterms are just next year. This is them setting the groundwork to make sure that in the end that they get the people they want in. Unless, again, if we're not paying attention, if we're not getting people registered to vote, if we're not getting them to the polls, to not use everything available to them to vote. This is why I sit here and say, despite what a lot of people believe, voting matters. Because if voting did not matter, they would not be doing all this to make sure that you can't vote or that your vote doesn't count or dismay you. They would not be doing all this. I mean, prove me wrong. But again, moving right along, guys, I did want to go into a little bit of the George Floyd trial. I'm sorry, I keep on wanting to say George Floyd trial. That is so disrespectful. The trial of Derek Chauvin, in which now its second week is wrapped up, and I just want to play a little bit from the highlights of it.
From ABC News Live, the death of George Floyd. Derek Chauvin on trial.
Hello, everyone. Day 10 of the trial of Derek Chauvin for the killing of George Floyd has come to an end. And at the heart of this case is the question of what exactly medically caused the death of George Floyd. Now, for millions of people in this country and around the world, the answer to that question is obvious from that heart-wrenching video that so many millions have seen. It's Derek Chauvin's knee on George Floyd's neck. But of course, in our system, prosecutors are put to the burden of proving that beyond a reasonable doubt, Derek Chauvin is criminally responsible for the death of George Floyd. And that is why the medical evidence has been so critical, because in the autopsy of George Floyd, there was evidence of underlying heart disease and drug use, and that's where the defense is going. So today on the witness stand, medical examiner in Hennepin County, Andrew Baker, the man who conducted the autopsy of George Floyd, took the witness stand, and he described how he believes, in his expert opinion, George Floyd died. A combination of that restraint, the knee on the neck, and those underlying conditions. Here's how the medical examiner put it.
In my opinion, the physiology of what was going on with Mr. Floyd on the evening of May 25th is, you've already seen the photographs of his coronary arteries, so that you know he had very severe underlying heart disease. I don't know that we specifically got to it, Counselor, but Mr. Floyd also had what we call hypertensive heart disease, meaning his heart weighed more than it should. So he has a heart that already needs more oxygen than a normal heart by virtue of its size, and it's limited in its ability to step up to provide more oxygen when there's demand because of the narrowing of his coronary arteries. Now, in the context of an altercation with other people that involves things like physical restraint, that involves things like being held to the ground, that involves things like the pain that you would incur from having your cheek up against the asphalt, an abrasion on your shoulder, those events are going to cause stress hormones to pour out into your body, specifically things like adrenaline. And what that adrenaline is going to do is it's going to ask your heart to beat faster. It's going to ask your body for more oxygen so that you can get through that altercation. And in my opinion, the law enforcement subdual restraint and the neck compression was just more than Mr. Floyd could take by virtue of those heart conditions.
Just more than he could take. That's the medical examiner on the death of George Floyd. Let's go to Zoreen Shah in Minneapolis, right outside the courthouse. This was an important witness, Zoreen, and one that really delivered for the prosecution, but also that the defense tried to make hay with.
Yeah, Terry, and an important, very, very important witness. Well, what you said a few minutes ago was really interesting, though. You said what happened in the video seemed obvious to us. Well, what was really interesting is that the medical examiner, Andrew Baker, he says he didn't actually see the video before he did the autopsy. Unlike the rest of us and the rest of the world, he saw the video after he did the autopsy. Now, he was an incredibly anticipated witness. For the last 2 days, the prosecution has been bringing up medical experts, but this this man, he is the one who conducted the autopsy, the official one, and he actually provided elements for both the defense and both the prosecution to use in their favor. Now, one thing that he said was that the heart appeared normal. In fact, he didn't even take photos of it. But on the other hand, he said the heart weighed quite a bit. It weighed a lot more than what would be normal, and it needed more oxygen. Take a listen.
What today remains your opinion as to the cause of death for Mr. Floyd?
So my opinion remains unchanged. It's what I put on the death certificate last June. That's cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual restraint, and neck compression. That was my top line then. It would stay my top line now.
And so if we look at the other contributing conditions, those other contributing conditions are not conditions that you consider direct causes. Is that true?
They are not direct causes of Mr. Floyd's death. That's true. They're contributing causes.
And in terms of manner of death, you found then, and do you stand by today, that the manner of death for Mr. Floyd was, as you would call it, homicide?
Yes, I would still classify it as a homicide today.
A very
Okay, so I'm just going to cut out there because, like I said, it keeps on. I don't want to keep going on with that. But I did want to point that out. That was actually this week's focus was on the medical examination reports for George Floyd. And as you heard from the guy that actually did the autopsy, that yes, he is still calling it a homicide. As far as and I keep saying this, and this was on a Facebook post. This was on a Facebook post that said there and said, "Do you want to know how messed up our society is? That we're having a trial that's going to take over 4 weeks over a guy we all saw murder a man." And it stuck with me on that. That as a society, we saw this man get killed right before our very eyes. And we're still having a trial over whether or not the person who put his knee on his neck is innocent or guilty. That alone tells you the society we live in. But going back to the trial, yes, the coroner who did the autopsy sat there and said that yes, he may have had underlying heart disease or hypertension, but ultimately it was the asphyxiation by law enforcement restraint that unfortunately led to Mr. Floyd's death. And of course, a little bit later on in the video, I didn't want to, skip trace to it. The defense did actually get a question of it, but the defense, just like they do with everybody else, they did a character assassination, a witness character assassination, in which they try to sit there and say, they asked, did George Floyd have drugs in his system? He goes, no. Every toxicology report that they ran on George Floyd says that he didn't have drugs in his system, even though it's somehow alleged that he swallowed something while doing the traffic stop. So again, that was the defense, and I keep telling you guys, this is what defense lawyers do. When they can't go after the person who was killed, they go after their character. They go after the character on record. If they go after the witnesses who are actually for the prosecution, this is what defense lawyers do. This is why Derek Chauvin right now is hoping that he can poke holes, or I should say, Derek Chauvin's lawyers are hoping he can poke holes in this kind of stuff, and it's going to be very difficult to do because it's the evidence is irrefutable. You did kill George Floyd. There is no other way to say it. Now it depends on whether or not he'll be convicted, but we'll follow that story as it comes along. This other one I did talk about during the week, though. Of course, I did talk about Major League Baseball because of what's going on in Georgia with the voter laws that were put in there. Again, Georgia, Texas, all those 47 states are changing their voter laws. So because Georgia signed theirs into law not too long ago, Major League Baseball, along with a lot of other corporations, things of that nature, have pulled their All-Star game from Atlanta, which again was very sad because Major League Baseball's All-Star weekend is usually a cash crop for whatever city that's in. I mean, not only for the fact that whatever field it's being played at, but it's a big boost to hotels and restaurants and other tourist attractions there. Usually Atlanta does benefit from All-Star Weekend, but it looks like in this case it is not, as Major League Baseball has pulled from Atlanta to, I believe, to Coors Field in Colorado. And again, it is very sad to see that. But Turtle Mitch McConnell, how in the world is he still in office? I still do not know. Had some choice words to tell corporations about exercising their right to say anything.
Same standard they applied to Georgia. They couldn't have games in St. Louis because Missouri has a more restrictive voter law than Georgia, than the new Georgia law. What are they going to do about the Mets and the Yankees? New York has a more restrictive voter participation law than the new Georgia law. Where does it end? So my warning, if you will, to corporate America is to stay out of politics. It's not what you're designed for. And don't be intimidated by the left into taking up causes that put you right in the middle of one of America's greatest political debates. You know, Republicans drink Coca-Cola too. And we fly. And we like baseball. This is a pretty competitive political environment in America, as I just pointed out, a 50-50 Senate. If I were running a major corporation, I'd stay out of politics.
Yes, he literally had the balls to sit there and say, "Hey, corporations, stay out of our stuff, but still pay us donations." You know, like the NRA does. But I mean, it is amazing the gall that Mitch McConnell has to sit there and tell companies, "Hey, don't get involved." He wouldn't say that to Nike. Nike has made. Remember when Nike made Colin Kaepernick the face of their endorsements, and how many people burn their Nikes? Which I still think it's funny that, you know, burning your Nikes is doing what exactly? Nike's already got your money. But I find it amazing that Mitch McConnell is doing this only because Major League Baseball, not only has Major League Baseball spoken out against this, filmmakers are no longer going to Georgia for movies. Keep in mind, Atlanta is usually the mecca for a lot of movies being made, specifically Disney/Marvel. So again, that could be pulled away, and that I mean, granted, it's supposed to do this to show that we're in solidarity with these voting laws that are unconstitutional. But again, it's one of those things to where I sit there and I say, why not? I like this. And the NRA has filed bankruptcy. You're exactly right, Ms. Titan. The NRA has filed bankruptcy. So I'm not surprised by that. I mean, it's still being ruled on whether or not they can do it because they're trying to move to a right-to-work state, which is the whole point of the NRA anyway. But again, it's McConnell talking about corporations should stay out of stuff, which again, I mean, you can't have both ways. Because keep in mind, it wasn't too long ago the Republicans were like, well, corporations, right along with Mitt Romney, well, corporations are people too. And then you turn around and say, oh, when they go against you, it's like, no, corporations, you're not people, stay in your lane. You just pay us for what the stuff you want us to do, and we'll take care of the rest. And that's exactly what Mitch McConnell is saying. He goes, well, Republicans drink Coca-Cola too. What do you want, an endorsement? You want an endorsement deal? I mean, what do you want, a Kylie Jenner Pepsi deal is what you want? I'm sorry, Mitch McConnell, you drinking Coca-Cola commercial will tank that company overnight, personally. But again, the hypocrisy of conservatives is amazing. But moving right along, guys, I did want to talk a little bit about Biden because President Biden is moving forward not only on his infrastructure bill, but he's also moving forward on gun control. And I know I might lose a lot of people on this because this is what he wants to do as far as gun control measures going forward.
Taking steps to confront not just the gun crisis, but what is actually a public health crisis. Nothing I'm about to recommend in any way impinges on the Second Amendment. They're phony arguments suggesting that these are Second Amendment rights at stake from what we're talking about. But no amendment No amendment to the Constitution is absolute. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. We call it freedom of speech. From the very beginning, you couldn't own any weapon you wanted to own. From the very beginning the Second Amendment existed, certain people weren't allowed to have weapons. So the idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic, and it's an international embarrassment. And today I'm announcing several initial steps my administration is taking to curb this epidemic of gun violence. Much more need be done, but the first, want to rein in the proliferation of so-called ghost guns. These are guns that are homemade, built from a kit, that include directions on how to finish the firearm. You can go buy the kit. They have no serial numbers, so when they show up at a crime scene, they can't be traced. And the buyers aren't required to pass a background check to buy the kit. You know, I want to see these kits treated as firearms under the Gun Control Act, which is going to require that the seller and manufacturers make the key parts with serial numbers. The second action we're going to take, back in the year 2000, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms released a report on its investigations of firearms trafficking in America. The report was of pivotal value. It was an important tool for policymakers when I was in the Senate and beyond, at all levels, to stop firearms from being illegally diverted into dangerous hands. Today, with online sales and ghost guns, times and trafficking methods have changed, and we have to adjust. We also have to ask the Justice Department to release a new annual report. This report will better help policymakers address firearms trafficking as it is today, not what it was yesterday. The third change, we want to treat pistols modified with stabilizing braces with the seriousness they deserve. These modifications to firearms that make them more lethal should be subject to the National Firearms Act. The National Firearms Act requires that a potential owner pay a $200 fee and submit their name and other identifying information to the Justice Department, just as they would if they went out and purchased a silencer for a gun. Fourthly, during my campaign for president, I wanted to make it easier for states to adopt extreme risk protection order laws. They're also called red flag laws, which everybody in this lawn knows, but many people listening do not know. These laws allow a police or family member to petition a court in their jurisdiction and say, I want you to temporarily remove from the following people any firearm they may possess because they're a danger and a crisis. They're presenting a danger to themselves and to others. Additionally, we recognize that cities across the country are experiencing historic spikes in homicides, as the law enforcement can tell you. The violence is hitting black and brown communities the hardest. Homicide is the leading cause of death of black boys and men ages 15 to 34. Gun violence in America, for those of you who think of this from an economic standpoint listening to me, estimated to cost the nation $280 billion, let me say it again, $280 billion a year. Finally, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the key agency enforcing gun laws, hasn't had a permanent director since 2015. Today, I'm proud to nominate David Chipman to serve as the director of the AFT. So, folks, this is just the start. We've got a lot of work to do, but I know almost every one of you sitting in the garden here. None of you ever given up. We're not going to give up now. The idea that we have so many people dying every single day from gun violence in America is a blemish on our character as a nation. Let me say to all of you, God bless you, but most...
Okay, so I just want to go ahead and stop it there because, again, he wraps it up. So Biden did actually come forward with some gun control narratives that he wants to go by. A lot of them I agree with. I know for a lot of people who are fans or gun owners, I relate. I'm one. But let me also say this. This is not a rallying cry for, they're coming to take your guns. No, they're not. And this is the point. And this thing I want to keep pointing out all the time. That whenever gun control is ever talked about or brought up or just anything of that nature, they're never coming for your guns. That's a Republic. That's a conservative talking point. That horse has been beat down so many times that it might as well be glue. No one is ever coming for your guns. Now, again, with that also being said, do we need to regulate how guns are sold, how they're purchased, how they're tracked? You know, ghost guns, as you pointed out, because ghost guns are a thing. Because ghost guns are basically your own handmade guns that teach you how to make them. And at the same time, like Joe Biden said, like President Biden said, there's no way to track them. And the purchase of these ghost guns, this is not as forthcoming as if you went to Academy or Bass Pro Shops or wherever you go buy your guns. It's not as restrictive, which a lot of people do like. And I said, now that's the scary part right there. That some people don't like all the restrictions on buying a firearm. That bothers me a little bit. Because if your whole thing is about restrictions and you say, oh, I don't like this because I'm going to be on paperwork. Oh, I don't want you owning anything. I don't even want you owning a broom, much less a firearm, if your problem is legislation. I don't want you owning a firearm when someone says, well, a brace to my arm to stabilize my shooting, I got to pay $200 from that? Yes, as you should. And you should be on a list so we know what you have. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with legislation because we've seen what happens when a lack of legislation leads to. Because the old argument is, oh well, gun-free zones guns-free zones don't really stop anything. Well, of course, it's not going to stop anything because a gun-free zone still doesn't prevent the person from going somewhere else and buying a gun. I've been saying this in Tennessee the whole entire time. Tennessee is one of the most easiest states to go buy a gun. You don't believe me? Wait for the next gun trade and knife show. Take $1,000 in your ID, and I guarantee you, wherever you go in that gun trade and knife show, you'll be able to get a firearm that you want for whatever X out of money, and the paperwork there will be very little. And that's just in Tennessee, and I know it because I witnessed it. So I am not against what President Biden is trying to do. I think it's a great idea. I really don't see any issues with it. And at the same time, we've seen what happens when we're not pushing for stronger legislation. For all those gun people out there, they're not taking your guns. We're just simply trying to make sure it's streamlined. And yes, you should be put on a list if you got firearms. And yes, the red flag law, I do like that. Because again, how many times have we sat there and seen people who have firearms who look mentally unstable or who look like they're a danger or a threat, to our society? I would love to be able to go to a judge and say, hey, this guy or this person is a threat. They shouldn't hold guns. They shouldn't have guns. Let's temporarily remove them. And if a judge agrees, then again, that's justified. I have no issue with that. But I know some people who own guns who are going to sit there and say, well, this is the government's way of taking guns away from you. It's not. It's actually a legal, forthright process of doing things. I got no issue with that. But moving right along, guys, I do have some sad news to report about the Amazon warehouse vote that was happening in Bessemer, Alabama. And, well, let's just go ahead and get to the bad news.
On a story we've been following all week long out of Amazon, the vote count is in, and Amazon has won enough votes to beat the union effort in Alabama. NBC News correspondent Cal Perry joins us now from Birmingham, Alabama. Cal, bring us up to speed on what's happened there and what's the reaction been?
So the vote is over, and it was fairly one-sided. I'll give you the final numbers. 1,798 votes against the union, 738 votes for the union, with 505 ballots set aside. Those ballots were challenged by Amazon in sort of the initial processing phase. What does this mean? Well, it means business as usual for Amazon, and it means business as usual for the big tech companies who are watching this vote very closely. Amazon employs hundreds of thousands of Americans. When you look at these warehouse jobs, they've become basically the new factory jobs in America. Anyone who is sitting here watching this right now orders things off Amazon, knows how that works. And so this vote was very important when it comes to the labor's relations to big tech. This was a very important moment. I think certainly the labor unions were hoping that this was going to go their way and that this would start something bigger. We can read to you the statement from the RWDSU, the Retail Wholesale Department Store Union. This was the union that would have been in place. And here's the statement. We can put it up. Quote, "Our system is broken. Amazon took full advantage of that and will be calling on the labor board to hold Amazon accountable for its illegal and egregious behavior during the campaign. But make no mistake about it, this still represents an important moment for working people, and their voices will be heard." What that statement is referencing is the very rough back and forth that took place for weeks here in Alabama, where Amazon was telling employees that they didn't need the union, that it was going to cost them dues, though this is a right-to-work state, so that is sort of fairly questionable. They said that the union would basically get in the way of them communicating with employees, and the union said that they were basically leaning on employees, if not directly threatening them, that they had sort of leverage over these employees, which, when you look at the big picture, is fairly true. As I said, Amazon employing hundreds of thousands of people across the country. And so for now, Aaron, business as usual, though, again, these labor unions, and you heard it there in that statement, they're looking to the future. You can expect more of these votes, more of these conversations to take place down the line.
I mean, there is no other way to say it, guys. The union vote didn't go through as we planned. Unfortunately, Amazon, let's be honest, Amazon is pretty good about intimidating folks. Now, keep in mind, I was following this story now for like the last 3 months about this vote. Really looking forward to actually seeing a union, because I keep saying this. Unions are needed in America right now to protect the workers. And the next couple of stories I'm about to show after that prove how much unions are needed. But Amazon, I mean, let's be honest, they intimidated individuals. They sat there and told them they don't need unions. They sat there and said, well, hey, you get paid $15, you get paid $15 plus an hour, and you get benefits from day one. Yes, but you also get put under insane work conditions. If you're an Amazon driver, you guys heard me cover last week that Amazon drivers admit when they're out and about and they can't find bathrooms, yeah, they pee in jars in the trucks. Crazy. But again, it's not uncommon. Amazon at this point knows that they have a lot of people on the hook for basically job suppression, and we all know with the economy and the way things are right now, it is very, very difficult to get by, especially with the simple fact of the matter is, if Amazon is the only job that you can lean on, and this company is sitting there saying, hey, if this union forms, you may lose your job. If this union forms, they've been told that the site may close, or things of that nature. Everything that's been put out there makes me think that the simple fact of the matter is, of course Amazon loves this, because they're able to, like the reporter said, they go back to business as usual. And for the workers, they are put back in those same conditions. But again, a union would have changed a lot of things at Amazon, and would have had a lot of these other tech companies very worried, because let's be honest, a lot of these companies out there don't have unions anymore. And that's the problem when it comes to the disparity between workers and everyone else. You don't believe me? Look at an example. And on the next story I wanted to point this out, because I played that story about Amazon not getting, about workers voting not to get Amazon. Because think about that, 1,700 some change versus 700 votes, with 505 votes in contention, which means that Amazon is challenging the validity of those votes. So again, they managed to convince 1,700 plus workers that what they're doing is wrong. That alone should be effing scary, because we know what they did. But look at the night and day between where a worker is taken care of by his employees and vice versa.
Grayton Resort and Casino is betting on its workers.
Our ancestors had a strong ethic of taking care of one another
After shutting down for 3 months last year, the casino, owned by the Federated Indians of Grayton Rancheria, bucked national trends this spring, permanently raising starting wages for all workers to $17.50 an hour for tip jobs and $18.50 an hour for non-tipped jobs. Employees earning a salary got a 10% bump.
I was able to get my daughter braces. It's improved our life.
Shanti Daru is working towards a college degree.
The raise is definitely going to make me able to pay that off a lot quicker.
How could you afford to raise everyone's wages in such a difficult time?
It was very difficult. We were closed for 92 days, and we kept their benefits all the way through. I've always believed in putting money aside for a rainy day.
But for millions working on the front lines like grocery store cashiers, this hasn't been the case. Many who received hero pay during the pandemic have had the extra compensation revoked, and efforts to raise the federal minimum wage recently failed in Congress. According to the Congressional Budget Office, increasing it to $15 an hour by 2025 would benefit up to 27 million workers and lift nearly 1 million out of poverty. But on the flip side, an estimated 1.4 million workers would lose their jobs. For the casino, paying workers more is a gamble that's worth it.
You keep the best team members. It makes economic sense for the business. If you do well, you must do what you can for those who have enabled you to do well.
Jolene Kent, NBC News.
Night and day, ain't it? That, you see what happens when you invest in your workers, right? You see what happens when you invest in your workers and it pays off. Versus, the hero workers. I don't call them, like I said before, I don't say essential workers because that is a corporate buzzword that just is really BS. I say essential people. Now, these essential people, like I always think of in the podcast, cashiers, those that work in grocery stores, those that work in, of course, warehouses like Amazon, they don't get hazard pay. I mean, even me, as I was called back to work into the office, albeit an empty office, we still don't get hazard pay. I mean, we did for a short while, and they said, "Oh, well, you guys don't need hazard pay anymore." No, as long as COVID-19 is still out there, yes, we do. We definitely do need hazard pay. But again, this just goes to show you, just like in the next story, the disparity of how workers are treated in the workplace.
Brown makes $13.77 an hour cleaning a very busy emergency department at this hospital in Kansas City, Missouri.
I'm not greedy. I just want to get by.
COVID has made it particularly difficult this year, with some workers, he says, quitting out of fear.
So you were working especially hard.
Yes, ma'am.
On his feet all day, risking his own health but not making enough to rent an apartment, he crashes at his sister's and talks to us from his car.
Did you get a bonus for that extra hard work?
We didn't get nothing.
Nothing?
We didn't get nothing. We didn't get hazard pay. We didn't get a bonus.
What he did get was COVID. When he got back to work, they made him Employee of the Month and gave him a $6 voucher to the cafeteria.
It felt like a slap in the face.
While Jamel got no bump in his salary, new federal filings reveal HCA Healthcare, which owns the hospital, gave its CEO, Samuel Hazen, a 13% raise, bringing him to a whopping $30 million a year, over 500 times the average HCA worker and 1,000 times Jamel's pay.
Pay us fair wages. Treat us like we treat your patients.
Jamel's union has been asking for $15 an hour for folks like him who've received no increase for 2 years. HCA, which owns 200 or so hospitals, had repeatedly said no, but finally agreed last week to the increase for Kansas City workers only after NBC News contacted them. Mr. Hazen declined to talk to NBC News, HCA saying in part, "We value our colleagues and are committed to offering competitive compensation and benefits." And yet, the great national divide between the income of those at the top and those at the bottom persists. The heads of corporations like GE, Starbucks, and Acuity Brands received more than 1,000 times their average workers last year, with Walgreens, then CEO, earning over 500 times. None of those CEOs agreed to speak with NBC News, each company saying their practices align with their shareholders' interests and that the CEO will take a hit if their stock price falls. But since 1978, CEO compensation has risen over 1,000%, compared with only a 14% increase for average workers. In theory, CEOs are handsomely paid to increase a company's value.
The problem is not that somebody's getting paid a lot of money. The problem is they get paid whether they do well or whether they do badly.
Glenn Kelman, the CEO of Redfin, a real estate brokerage firm, is bucking the trend. Under Kelman's leadership, Redfin more than tripled in value to just under $7 billion. He owns a valuable chunk of company stock, but makes only 14 times his average employee and says that's plenty.
I don't think I deserve a Nobel Prize for that.
In 2019, his annual income, including stock, was about $1 million. Last year, he didn't take his salary.
Shareholders and investors are waking up to the idea that lots of people create shareholder value, and that the best way to do it over the long haul isn't to just bet on one guy or one woman, but to bet on the whole company and all the people behind it.
That sounds a lot like what Jamal Brown believes, too. Cynthia McPhee.
Crazy, isn't it? That is crazy. And again, that I said the thing about the U.S., we are the only nation out there whose CEO, the pay comparison between the CEO of a company and its worker is well over 5. It's almost 1,000 to 1, meaning that whatever you make, in order for you to make as much as you make the CEO of your company, it's 1,000 times more. That means a worker within their lifetime will never be able to make exactly what the CEO makes in 1 year. And again, that's the disparity I'm talking about. The whole thing, not only about unions, because you heard right there what the guy said, that he was in a union with HCA, and the union that sat there and said we need $15 an hour, which again is the minimum wage right now. Well, was the minimum wage law, and it still should be pushed by Democrats to really make that the federal mandate. Because for minimum wage, as it was designed to be, was supposed to be that you could survive off this. It's the lowest amount, but you can survive off this. Now, anybody else tell you $7.30 an hour is slave wages? It really is. Because how in the world can anybody survive off $7.30 an hour? You can't even get an apartment. You can barely get food. You can barely. Apartment is out of the question. I'm not even going to talk about a car. For the simple fact of the matter is, there needs to be some accountability. It's like I said, that's where I said unions come into place. The minimum law needs to be put into place. The minimum wage law needs to be increased, because right now a lot of people out there are hurting. And like you see from one guy who bust your butt at a job and you can't even afford a place to stay. And yet I'm supposed to, and CEOs, of course the CEOs decline for comment. Let's just be honest. If you're making anywhere from 7 to 14 to higher than that $1 million a year, and you don't want to be interviewed, of course you won't be interviewed, because what you're going to sit there and say, oh, well, we're just following the state rules and federal mandates. We're just a business trying to survive, as he speaks from his multi-million-dollar mansion, as he speaks from his. Because I've seen guys like that. I have seen CEOs where they got golden parachutes on their way out. $80 million or more for tanking company. I'm not going to say the guy's name, but just know that at a company I worked for, the CEO at the time was on his way out after basically destroying the company, and they gave him $80 million for it. I did not know in the world of corporate America that you could screw up so badly that they pay you to leave. Especially $80 million. And of course, it baffles the mind. It baffles the mind because, again, we're sitting here wondering, okay, what are these Democrats doing? And like I said, it's all connected. It's just like everything else. It's all connected. which is the reason why I want to go to this next to last story I got, which again, as I talked about, employee wages and things of this nature, does bring up the next story of a push behind a fourth stimulus check. Because let's be honest, these single $1,400 checks they're pushing out are helpful, but again, when that $1,400 runs out, people are still finding themselves in the same situation because jobs aren't paying enough. We don't have a minimum wage set at $15 an hour. At the same time, folks are just not able to find work. So again, now there seems to be a push to get continuous checks in. 21 senators, all Democrats, signed a letter to have recurring stimulus payments of $1,400. Now again, it amazes me so that $1,400 would be fine. I mean, don't get me wrong. Bernie Sanders turned around and sat there and said, it's just funny how Bernie Sanders, by the way, Senator Bernie Sanders has kind of been spot on about everything that has happened. He said he actually said a long time ago last year, back in March during the beginning of this pandemic, that Americans should receive $2,000 a month until the pandemic is over. We know we have the money to do it. And everybody sat there and said, well, we can't pay all Americans $2,000 a month. But yet we can pay them a $1,200, a $600, and then a $900 stimulus. And then just this past month or so, $1,400. So we can do it 4 times, but we can't do it recurringly. And this is why I keep saying is where Democrats really need to, get together, circle the wagons, and get this pushed. That if you did have a reoccurring stimulus of $2,000 to every American, now you can put in there, well, we can't pay everybody that's, okay, fine. Set a current stimulus. Say for example, if a person makes $100,000, say $100,000 is the cap. If you make $100,000 a year, you don't get a stimulus. Everybody else under $100,000 gets one. Say for couples, if you as a couple make $200,000 a year, if you guys together, your incomes is $200,000 a year, you don't get a stimulus. You just have the caps. If you're single, $100,000. If you're a couple, it's $200,000. If you make those, you don't get a stimulus. Cool. You just acknowledge the 2 top tiers. Because let's be honest, if you're making $100,000 a year by yourself or more, or if you're making $200,000 a year or more, if you're a couple, chances are you're not even in the same boat as many other Americans, because some people's average salaries, because I know the average salary in Tennessee right now is somewhere between $45,000 to $55,000 a year. That's average. Yes, it does up and down. It fluctuates because you do have those that are even making $80,000 and $90,000 a year, but you're looking at maybe 21 to 25%. Using my home state of Tennessee, maybe 20 to 25% of the individuals living there are making more than $80,000. Everybody else under that still falls between the $45,000 to $57,000 range. They are talking about doing their stimulus, but the problem is with the stimulus it's just simple fact of the matter is you have Democrats not pushing forward on this. That yes, there needs to be a recurring stimulus. There needs to be an increase in the minimum wage. There needs to be an influx of cash to people, because we've seen what happens when you increase the payments or when you increase capital in individuals, the economy does great. History and math will tell you all the same. When you increase taxes on the rich and you influx money into the lower classes, the economy does well. It's a tale as old as time. It happened in the New Deal. It happened when President Obama pulled us out of the recession. It's happened multiple times in history when a Democratic administration has decided to spend more and tax high on the rich. It's always worked out. I'm just being honest. But for the fact of the matter is, going back to the stimulus plan, it definitely does need to happen. Just because people out there are hurting. I mean, like I said before, a lot of people didn't take in consideration the fast food industry, which actually does employ a lot of individuals. But fast food places are not paying $10 an hour. Some of them are paying better. Some of them are paying closer to $9, sometimes $8. Could you imagine? Like I said, I don't knock anybody that works at McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, because the simple fact of the matter is maybe that's the only job they can get. But at the same time, fast food industries take advantage of this. That's why I keep sitting there saying the entire time, not only about the fact of unions, but the fact of the matter is, imagine if there was a federal mandate of $15 an hour. Now, granted, that's not matching what the current production flow is. If we were able to match inflation and current product induction from the U.S., technically minimum wage right now would be $23 and some change, because that's what minimum wage is supposed to be. Minimum wage is supposed to be the bare minimum that you can live off of, and be able to afford an apartment, afford a car, afford food, clothing, things of that nature. And at $7.30 an hour, it's just not happening at all. That's working poverty, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, is that right now we are the working poverty, and without those things in place, we are going to we're going to see more, like I said before in the previous stories, we're going to see the disparity between CEOs and their workers. Because again, it's anywhere from, as you saw in the story, it's anywhere from 500 to 1,000 times more. So say your average bottom tier worker, like I said before, if the janitor of your company and the CEO of your company, and between their pay and his pay is 1,000 times what the janitor is paying, there is something truly wrong with our economy and the way we do business if there is that big of a wage disparity. I'm just saying. But like I said before, again, I can't talk about the guy who left the company I used to work for, because again, he fouled up so bad that they gave him an $80 million golden parachute. Now, for all those that don't know what golden parachute is, it basically is a exit package. Usually is a lot of money. I mean, the same thing was done with a lot of CEOs that have screwed up, which apparently I must have picked the wrong profession, because who knew that you could be a CEO, screw up a company, and get paid on your way out? I thought cybersecurity was the way to go, but apparently being a CEO is where it's at. But anyway, the last story that I got, guys, before we get to our feel good news segment, is about basically police reform. Now, excuse me. So with that being said, guys, police reform itself, since George Floyd, has become a hot button topic. We are wondering where it's at from this point, because George Floyd is just a name of others out there who have been killed or maimed or murdered at the hands of law enforcement. So a lot of people are asking, because of what's going on, where right now are we on police reform? And unfortunately, it seems to be at a standstill. Susan Rice, who was recommended as a head of state for Joe Biden's administration, says that they are hammering out the details of potential federal legislation. That's not really saying anything. They have also said that the House of Representatives has a police reform, saying that supports the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that was introduced in February of last year, but it didn't pass because, again, Mitch McConnell didn't want to hear it. There has also been talks of a possible compromise of police reform with Republican Senator Tim Scott in South Carolina. That is a scary ass thought, because he's a Tea Party politician. Of course, nothing happens. So again, guys, we have to ask this question of what's actually going on right now, because yes, there is some bills that are put in. Of course, the House last year did try to put in a ban on police neck holds, including choke holds, to be illegal, car ride holds to be illegal. They wanted to get rid of no-knock warrants. They wanted to also increase body cameras and police dashboard cameras. They wanted to do all of these things, but here's the problem. None of that got passed. And so a lot of people, especially black people, are asking. It's like, what are we going to... I was like, what is it actually going to do? Because you hear it all the time, defund the police. I'm not against defunding the police, but a lot of people don't understand what defunding the police actually means. What defunding the police actually means is not that we're firing cops. No, we want cops to be more trained. We want them to be demilitarized, which means they should not get military-style weapons, gear, ammunition, or vehicles. All that stuff they should not need. We're not doing a small platoon. We also want police to be trained mental health awareness. We want them to be trained in de-escalation tactics. We want them to be trained. We want them to be trained in those things because we've seen what other countries have done with their law enforcement. What they've done as far as increased training, mental health checks, things of that nature. We've seen what happens when other countries and their police styles and what they've done, and it's worked out great. So again, I'm not complaining about that. Why are we not doing it here? Because like I said before, earlier in this podcast, you could be a hairstylist. Trained to be a hairstylist takes longer than being a law enforcement officer. Training to be a X-ray technician takes longer than being a law enforcement officer. It's half a year. No degree required. No degree in criminal law required, although a degree in criminal law is needed to become a detective. But to be a regular street officer, none. 6 months of training. And as long as you make it past those 6 months, congratulations, you're law enforcement. And again, that tells us everything we want to know. And like I said before, that's where police reform should happen. And again, with this whole idea of this police reform, we're not seeing anything, but I also say it like this. We also cannot depend upon President Joe Biden and Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. I love saying that. I love saying Madam Vice President. Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, do not get me wrong. Will they introduce measures? Yes, but keep in mind, and I keep saying this all the time, the Democrats are on a time crunch right now. Midterm elections is next year, which means that this slim majority that they have gives them very little time to push through whatever measures they want to push through. They're trying to push through. It's a little difficult to do that and still focus on police reform, even though they talked about it. But this is why I sit there and say the local side of things is where it works. This is why I sit there and say from a local standpoint, we have to be able to push forward with our own reforms, to push people to nominate and put people in place that's going to represent us the best. This is why I say local and state legislation is so important, because without those things, you're not going to expect a lot of federal oversight help on this, unless the George Floyd Policing Act is actually put forward again, which again I would like to think they're going to put it forward again. But again, with police reform going out there, I'm not seeing a change right now. I would like to see some action on this, but it's going to have to be from every state, because if we don't want the same thing that happened to George Floyd, the same things that happened to Philando Castile, the same thing that happened to Eric Gardner, the same thing that happened to Sandra Bland, the same thing that happened to Tamir Rice, and I can keep going down that list. And that list is always going to stick with every black person, because again, we're not just saying their names. We're saying their names because some things need to change. And again, I don't want to hear Blue Lives Matter. I don't want to hear All Lives Matter, because it's only said in contrast to Black Lives Matter, because some white folks feel inclined to be involved in anything just because they're not in the spotlight. Yes, I said it. So, with that being said, guys, I do want to get to our feel-good segment, because usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of stuff, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes dark and gloomy, but, it's the weekend, trying to put it on a good note, trying to give some positive vibes out there, make you feel good, trying to get you that Bruno Mars, Silk Sonic, I'm going to leave the door open type of feel, my house clean, my pool warm, I'm sipping wine in a robe, I'm too fine to be alone. Not me, but I need a retwist. But anyway, with that being said, let me actually talk about the stories I got that make you, that hopefully will put you on a smile on your face. I did talk about this story Wednesday, where I sat there and said that a Georgia restaurant owner had this guy try to break in and steal money. Of course, he didn't really get much because of the cashier happening, but it was an interesting thing that the Georgia owner sat there and said. He pretty much sat there and said, our burritos are such a smash hit that we've got people breaking in at 4 a.m. for their fix. So if you see our door looking hurricane fabulous, this is why. He also said to the would-be robber who is clearly struggling with life decisions or having money issues, please swing by for a job application. There are better opportunities out there than this path you've chosen. No police, no questions. Let's sit down and talk about how we can help you and fix the road that you're on. Now, I don't know about y'all. That's powerful. I mean, don't get me wrong. If someone breaks into your restaurant and tries to steal money from you, I mean, it's amazing for the simple fact of the matter. It's just that it's powerful. I mean, it's a different way of thinking. It's a lot of compassion because he's actually had restaurant owner actually had donations and people come out forth and saying, you know, what you're doing is great, that, you know, you're really trying to help folks. And that's a way of thinking where it's like, you know, we're not getting involved with the police for this. Let's help you out. And that, I have to give it to him. That right there was compassion and a lot of forgiveness. Or, you know, like I said before, I'm like, if it was me, it's a little hard to sit there and want to offer a guy a job application after he broke my window. But, you know, for some individuals, they just have that within them. And I can't be mad about that. But the next story I got, guys, is about mechanics. Now, I know a lot of y'all may feel how y'all feel about mechanics. I myself am an amateur one. I am not a professional one. I tell everybody that I like working on cars as an amateur. Amateur. I keep saying that. Hey, what's going on? What's going on, Adam? Hope all is well with you across the pond, man. But I tell people this story because, again, I like what this guy did because he kind of went the extra mile to help a woman in need.
For the last 24 years, Chris Barber has been Mr. Fix-It when it comes to cars and motors.
That's just what I do.
He's a lead tech at North Smithfield's Phantom Motor Works. Several weeks ago, he met Linda Abrantz.
I just saw Linda rolling by one day, and she needed air in her tires.
I live right up the street, and during COVID, the gym closed. So I'm like, well, I got to do something for exercise.
20 years ago, Linda was on a quad that crashed.
So I'm a T6 complete paraplegic.
She uses a wheelchair, and her truck is a driving force behind her independence.
I would have never imagined my life being as fantastic as it is now, way back then.
Something that hasn't been all that great is her wheelchair lift. She says it was cheaply made, has broken several times, and the company it came from has been unhelpful.
If a human put it together, a human can fix it.
Recently, when it broke again, she brought it to Chris.
I trusted him, and that's really hard to find a mechanic that you trust.
I empathize with trying to be mobile, trying to be independent.
Although it was impossible to get parts, for 6 weeks he worked tirelessly, reinventing the wheel, literally.
My wife is disabled, so I understand the struggle. I don't mind stepping in.
When it came time for Linda to pay,
why make their life any more difficult?
She was charged peanuts. Now, like the mechanic who fixed it, her lift is dependable.
It's the way I was brought up, you know, one hand washes the other.
It just shows that, you know, there are good people in the world.
In North Smithfield, Sam Reed, NBC 10.
I can't be mad about that. I can't be mad about that. Because the guy did go above and beyond to fix a wheelchair lift. Now, for all those that, you know, I've been around disabled individuals. I have a few in my family, so I know the simple fact of the matter of, you know, having proper equipment, especially the transport to get yourself to places. So I completely get the whole idea of trying to get stuff fixed, and more importantly, finding people to basically trust. Because in my family, I'm usually the guy that, you know, hey, Will can fix it. Which I look at them and go, why it's got to be me? But anyway, but finding somebody you can trust at the same time, he didn't charge an arm and a leg for fixing it. That's just honestly a cool dude, in my opinion. But the last story I got, guys, is basically about Shaq. Shaq, for all those that don't know, Shaq has this thing where he doesn't like to show the good deeds that he does, which I can understand because good deeds are not meant to be shown. They're just meant to be done and then dip. But I like what this guy did. I like what Shaq did for this individual just because he just wanted to help the guy.
Shaq randomly played for a young man's engagement ring?
You know what happened yesterday?
When did this happen?
This happened yesterday. So I was in Zales looking for some loop earrings. and I seen the guy.
With the blue shirt on?
Yeah.
You went to the mall and went to Zales?
Wait, what?
To go look
You
for
don't want me to
earrings?
go to Piedmont Park. You're going to Zales?
First of all, I have a jewelry line at Zales. First of all.
Oh, okay. My
Ooh,
bad.
what kind of jewelry?
Yeah, everything. So anyway, I went in there to get some loop earrings, and I seen the guy come in. He was just so shy. He was saying, "Hey, how much do I owe to pay off my ring?" It was just, and I was like, "My man, how much is the ring?" And I'm not gonna say the amount, but it's not enough to me. But I just, you know, and this is something that I do every day. The other day, me and my mom went furniture shopping, and this lady, she had a autistic daughter, and you know, she was also, you know, looking to pay for some furniture. And I just took care of it. So I'm into making people happy. So whenever I leave the house, I just try to do a good deed. Like, I didn't mean for that to get out, because I don't do it for that, but like, the guy just came in, and you know, he's a young kid. He's a hard-working guy. He's like, "Hey man, I can come back next month," and then next, like, layaway. Like, you know, he put some money down, but I was like, "You know what? Tell your girlfriend I gotta take care of it." At first, he didn't want to take it. He's like, "Man, I can't do that." I said, "Don't worry about it. I do it all the time." So I'm just trying to make people smile. That's all.
Shaq. A guy like Shaq would sit there and be like, a guy like Shaq who, let's be honest, Shaq got money. Shaq got money. I mean, keep in mind, let's not talk about the multi-million-dollar deals he had when he was an NBA player. Let's not talk about the deals that he had with Gold Bond, with the General, and a lot of people don't know. Yes, Shaq does have a jewelry line at Zales that he endorses. He also still has, a lot of people don't know that he actually has a lot of album rights to very famous stars, to very famous artists. He still has the album rights to. He still has revenues coming in from Shaq Fu. Now, for all those that are my age, revenue from Shaq Fu, which was a terrible video game, but he still gets revenue from that. And on top of that, he still gets revenue from his shoes and suits and everything else. The man has money coming in from different situations. And I'm gonna be honest with you guys, it's a little hard in his case. And I said, the one thing he has about his mindset, like I keep on saying, one day I would love to be in, is that you get to an age to where, dude, I'm just trying to make people happy. That's it. I just want to be able to make people happy. I just want to be able to sit there and say, if I can do so at this time to help someone, cool, I'll do it. But it's amazing, like I said before, he goes, I didn't do this. He's like, I don't like it when it's public. I don't like it when, you know, and I understand that, because I don't mind. I love doing stuff for people. I do. But I don't want it to be public. I don't want it to be like, oh, well, you know, put this on Facebook. Will help me out. I'm like, I don't need that. It's not, if it has to be put on social media for vindication, then you didn't do it for the right reasons. Like in my case, if I'm doing for something for someone, then it's only because I am willing to do it for them and not for glory. And I gotta give Shaq credit. Shaq has done a lot of stuff, and that's just one of the many things that he talks about, but he doesn't really say it out loud, because, you know, if you're doing a good deed, you don't need to brag about it. So, and of course, the engagement ring, I can only imagine. Whoo! Engagement rings, boy, it's just, you know, when you spend about 3 or 4 or 5 or up, oof. I'm sorry. That just took me to a place. Anyway, thank you, Shaq. I'm pretty sure the guy that, you know, he went to Shaq, but they did kind of try to clown him a little bit. You know, you see Dwayne Wade's like, come on, bruh, Zales, bruh, you can have jewelers come out to your house. And I love how Shaq said, first of all, I got a line at Zales. Dwayne Wade. It's kind of I know they were joking with each other, but it kind of felt like a "Don't you come for me, Dwayne Wade. Don't come for me." It's like, don't do that. Kobe tried it. I know that was too soon. I apologize. But With that being said, guys, that's really all that we have for this podcast. Before I do get out of here, I do need to do some shameless plugging. And I do want to thank everybody that was watching this on Facebook, on YouTube, and also on Instagram. Because I know on Instagram, they weren't able to actually see the videos that I have here. But again, if you go to my Facebook page of William Buchanan, you'll be able to sit there and see all the videos that I've actually posted here. And also on YouTube for How the Frack We Got Here's YouTube page, you'll be able to see the videos there as well. Now, before I do get out of here, like I said, some shameless plugging I have to do. My other podcasting buddy who is back in the fold with us, Vaughn, Big VZA Dot, has returned. He actually will start doing, he actually has started doing his podcasting last Sunday with the VSTs. He will be doing another podcast of VSTs tomorrow. Please check out Big VZA Dot on Facebook to see when that's going to be happening. He is also bringing back his Rhythmness also during the week to reset your weekends, to reset your weeks on right. Keep in mind, Rhythmness is like America's Funniest Home Videos if done from World Star. So it definitely is a do not bring your kid situation, but it is for us adults. And of course, he still has his Funkin' Around and Rhythmness, which he will release at a later date. But definitely check out his page at Big VZA Dot for all that wonderful information. Now, as for me, your boy does do travel. That's right. I actually do travel now because it's fun. Well, it's fun for me. But anyway, my travel page, Uncle Obie's Adventures and More, is basically a play on my middle name because my niece and nephews will never know my first name because my family dictates that. That's neither their discussion. But anyway, Uncle Obie, just because of my name, is because I do believe in one thing in travel. Because the one thing I realized as I'm growing up is that I didn't do travel a lot. I was a workaholic. It was work, it was home, it was work, it was home, and I didn't actually get to really enjoy life. So I decided that, at this stage of my life that I really wanted to get out and travel more. And I also want to help people do the same. But I have a mission with Uncle Obie's Adventures and More. I do. Not only do I want to send people on the vacations that they want to go on, but I also want to try to save you a little bit of money because that's what people want in life, to be able to go where they want to and save a little bit of change in doing so. So hopefully, like I said, give me a chance to let me be that person for you. Definitely reach out to me, Uncle Obie's Adventures and More on Facebook or William Buchanan on Facebook. Let me know your travel destination and what you're willing to spend, and then I will go to work for you on getting you exactly what you need and hopefully get you where you want to go. Because at Uncle Obie's Adventures and More, we just don't sell travel, we sell great memories. And also, I do have a $100 referral going on right now, which means that if you know somebody that is that's needing to travel, whether it's booking hotels, rental car, airfare, all the above, whether it's down the street, across the states, or across the pond, please let me know. And as long as they book with me, then I will pay you $100. Yes, when they book with me, you get paid. Whether you know 2 people, 20 people, or 200, it's going to be a good payday for you. So there's no limits on the amount of well, crap, I just lost the words I was going to say. There is no limit on the amount of referrals that you can have. So just a limited income for those guys there said happy that didn't tell her blinker fluid was low. Yeah, that never gets old. But yes, aside from that, guys, if you copy and see the link at the bottom, especially if you're watching this on Facebook and YouTube, the link at the bottom, if you copy and paste it into your browser, will take you to my link tree for all of my YouTube groups for How the Frack We Got Here, Get Bit, and the Offense Podcast. Like I said before, guys, my scheduling hasn't changed. It has changed slightly. Every Wednesday from 8:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. is the midweek edition of How the Frack We Got Here. Every Friday from 8:30 to 10 p.m. is my video game, comic book, super television show, Get Bit, in which me and others do discuss pop culture, especially as we did last night. Also, every Saturday, as you're watching now from 10 a.m. to noon, is the How the Frack We Got Here podcast weekend recap. And a little bit later tonight, between 8:30 and 10 p.m., is my adult podcast of the Offense Podcast. The podcast that definitely does go there, and trust me, we definitely went there with last week's podcast, and this week will not be different. But definitely like, share, and subscribe, and pretty much, like I said, if you know people that are interested in this kind of stuff, share it with them. It's always, I'm always trying to build this podcast up along with my buddy Vaughn to where, if this can become our permanent jobs, I would not complain. With that being said, guys, I did want to say before I get out of here, thank you all for watching. If you watched this live and commented, I certainly appreciate that. I'll have to fix the anonymous thing because I don't know why it says anonymous. I know I saw one person's name pop up, so I have to see why about that because I like to be able to see as who I'm talking to and thank who I'm talking to. So if you did comment today and it says anonymous, I apologize, but I still want to thank you all the same. And if you're watching this on the playback, please comment as if it's live because I definitely still want your opinions on everything that I talked about today. I know I had to say that slow because my tongue just went, But aside from that, guys, I did want to sit there and say that this podcast is not just about, passing on the news. It's about staying informed because, again, television shows of old television news stations of old used to do that. And some actually do still to this day. But they are also surrounded by news stations that are 24/7, that are infatuated with either going left or going right, when all we're doing How the Frack We Got Here is just keeping you informed, giving you all the facts to allow you to make up your own mind and judgment. Because at the end of the day, we do a lot better when we're informed. Because when we're uninformed, we get Trump. When we're informed, we are able to elect our first black Madam Vice President. I just love saying that. But with that being said, guys, thank you all for watching. And again, I really appreciate you sticking with me, whether it was Facebook, whether it was YouTube, whether it was Instagram. We're trying to do all three things here, people. So I do thank everybody that was for watching. And again, guys, thank you, essential people. I hate saying essential workers. Thank you, essential people. Thank you, doctors, nurses aid, doctors aid, those that work in hospitals, those that work in gas stations, grocery stores, those that are truck drivers, those that work in warehouses like Amazon, and logistics like the United States Postal Service, UPS, FedEx, and DHL. You guys should get a lot more than what you're getting, but at least we are acknowledging you for what you're doing because, it needs to be acknowledged just for that. But aside from that, guys, have a wonderful weekend. Hopefully, guys, you all stay safe. If you're working, may your day be short and quick. But aside from that, thank you all for watching, guys. It's been fun. I'm out. See you on Alpha's Podcast tonight. Peace!